Well, hello, sports fans. This is George Freestone in the final episode of Our Baseball Journey, which is the story of my wife Carol and my visits to all 30 of the then current Major League parks, as well as four obsolete parks and a whole lot of fun. Well, this wrap up and reflections segment is going to be bittersweet for me because I've really enjoyed both putting together these episodes, researching a little bit to get ready to do them, and then listening to some of your feedback with regard to what you thought you enjoyed or maybe what you thought I could do better. But in this final episode, I thought it might be appropriate to celebrate my Mets final game at the Polo Grounds, which is the ballpark in New York that they started in 1962. When did the Polo Grounds open? In September of 1880. Pretty impressive longevity there for a ballpark to have lasted all the way to September of 1963. And in this September 1963 game, the Mets came into the game with a record of 49 and 104. And they were playing the Philadelphia Phillies, who at the time had a record of 81 and 72. Now, the Mets, unfortunately, lost this game, so they couldn't climb to the plateau of 50 victories yet in their second season. They closed it out at 49 after their rather markedly noteworthy 40 and 120 first season here at the Polo Grounds. Interestingly, this was not the first Mets final game in the Polo Grounds. Why is that, you say? Well, Shea was meant to be open in 1963, but as construction lagged, the Mets had to play another year in the Polo Grounds. And they finished with this particular game. When they played their final game in 1962, also at the Polo Grounds, a game that, oh, by the way, they won, they had every expectation 1963 was going to be at Shea, but it was not about to be. And so the Mets played their final season here again in the Polo Grounds with Rheingold beer waving at them there in center field. Okay, so my garb, well, I had to bring out my true colors, the team that I follow. So I have my Casey Stengel Mets jersey on, and Carol and I were in New York City in October of 2015, and that was right about the time that the Mets had their most recent experience in the World Series. They played the Kansas City Royals. They unfortunately did not win, but we'll see what happens in 2025. The Mets are looking pretty good in June of 2025. We'll have to see if they have the stamina to last for the entire season. And with that, I'm going to switch gears and share my desktop so we can see the slide that I'm going to talk from today. Let me move me, and then we'll talk a little bit about all the pictures and the text that you see on this slide. First bullet asks, how long did this journey take? Well, if you exclude the four obsolete parks that we visited, and you start the counter with the first visit to one of the currently open Major League parks. We began this in August of 2011, and we wrapped it up in April of 2024. However, we took a 4-year hiatus. Some would argue only a portion of that was for COVID, but we got ourselves wrapped up with grandchildren, lots of other activities. And so if you take out that 4-year gap, then the answer to that question is 12 and 2/3 years. If you recall, the first major league game that I attended was with my father. It was an April 1965 game at Shea. And we visited 3 other obsolete parks as well. I used this presentation really to chronicle our journey, but more specifically, I used the Ballpark app on the iPhone. And if you look in the center right, you'll see 2 images there. The first recounts the fact that we've seen 34 different ballparks, and you see a beginning of a running tab. The most recent game there is the City Series game between the once Philadelphia, now Oakland, now Sacramento Athletics versus the Phillies, where the Phillies took quite a beating. But there's a list of each of the games in reverse chronological order. You can apply pictures there. You can track lots of memories there as well. But it does a nice job of just chronicling each of the games that you went to. And it also provides a link, just as I did in the presentation, to the box scores. So I used the Ballpark app there. Another interesting thing that you can show on the Ballpark app is the tallies of the different Major League parks that you visited. And who would have guessed that on this journey, the park we visited most frequently, over in the far right, upper right, next to the Ballparks book, is Progressive Field in Cleveland. Then Citizens Bank. And you really don't see Citi Field show up there. Only been to Citi Field once, but to Shea twice, as the tally shows you over there. Second major bullet on this slide, going to the game was just part of the fun. And again, in order to make this attractive for both Carol and myself, we needed to spend a little time in each of these cities and not just be focused on the ball game. So we had tremendous food, and you can see a couple of images in the right corner, some seafood there. And that, I think, was from our final journey down to Texas and back. In the left bottom, in between the 2 baseball books by Joe Posnacki, you see my 70th birthday steak at Greenbrier in West Virginia, the resort I told you about in an earlier episode. So we ate very well. The picture of me in the right center bottom is actually in New Orleans with my Fightin' Phils ball cap on. So we saw a lot of tremendous restaurants, ate a lot of wonderful food. We went to many, many different museums as well. I can share just a few that I have pictured here. In the right center edge, you see Carol and myself in front of the World War II Museum. If you go up to the top on the right corner there, you'll see us at one of the NASA facilities. I believe that was from Huntsville in Alabama. And then you can see us also, no, Huntsville is the lower left corner. The upper right is from Houston. So I had those reversed. Please excuse me. We had a chance to share these visits with kids. as well as visit relatives and friends. And I told you about some of those. We visited national parks that were along the way. Of note, Crater Lake, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, a lot of wonderful national parks as well. Amusement parks, architecture from the cities. We took a tremendous number of photographs. So, lots of things to do in these cities, and that was part of the attraction for both Carol and myself. And secondly, getting there and just seeing a large part of the US was a tremendous joy. How many miles did we travel on this journey? Well, in total, and again, yes, I have a spreadsheet to track that. We traveled 36,600 miles. By air, 10,005. By train, 180. We traveled more than the circumference of the Earth, 27,150 miles by car. And more amazingly, by foot, we traveled 720 miles. Okay. So you see a lot of pictures on this particular slide, but how many pictures in total did we take? Well, both Carol and I enjoy taking a lot of pictures, and now that we have several grandchildren, they are frequent targets of our hobby. But on this journey, we took in excess of 40,000 photographs. You've only seen a small fraction of them here. All right, I'm going to talk about some of the ballparks here. And the question is, what are the first and second favorite ballparks for each Carol and myself? Well, let's first talk about some of the ballparks and the baseball images that you see around this particular slide. On the top left, you can see one of our bedrooms done up with a Major League Baseball blanket at the foot of the bed and quite the Mets bedspread, which, oh, by the way, my wife Carol made for me. And so that was very kind of her. And to the left of her is Carol at one of the museums that we visited. I commented on the World War II Museum. That was one of the health museums that we visited as well. No other ballpark museums? Center top right, you can see the image of the Polo Grounds that I talked from, which is my Zoom background. Now let me answer the question that this bullet is all about. What are the first and second favorite ballparks for each Carol and myself? Well, Carol's first favorite is Truist in Atlanta, and you see a picture of Truist in kind of the bottom center of the slide. My favorite is Camden Yards, and you see a picture of that in the middle right center, just to the left of the picture of the NASA facility from Houston. So you can see the warehouse facade just off right field there. Now, our second favorite park we agree on, and it's in the left lower portion of the screen. It's PNC in Pittsburgh, a lovely park as well. Okay, so what's next? This was a wonderful goal for both Carol and myself, and we've been best friends since we met kind of in 8th grade. So it's been a long journey there too, but a very enjoyable one. And this was a wonderful opportunity for best friends to work on this goal together and to enjoy these ballparks together, as well as the cities that they are in. And you can see right in the center there, one of the field trips that we took, ballpark tours. We're standing at what was AT&T Park at the time. I think it's Oracle Park now, with the Coke bottle and the baseball mitt just over Carol's head there in that shot of us, which was taken by somebody in the dugout. So very, very nice. Well, okay. Will we keep up with new stadiums, such as the fact that the Athletics are no longer playing in Oakland and they're winding their way slowly east to Las Vegas? Tampa, the roof was blown off of the Tropicana field, and either they'll build a new park or they'll refurbish Tampa. Tropicana, which is in St. Pete, by the way. But I have one other park there as well, and that gets into my attire too. Let's see if I can expose my shirt. So I have my Football Club Barcelona jersey on, and there are two shots of me at that particular stadium in Barcelona, Spain, on one of the trips that I had taken for Air Products. We were in Barcelona for like 3 weeks, tough duty, huh? Well, we were working very hard, and I had colleagues from Spain and from China, interestingly, with me. And I was the only native English speaker there. And in deference to me, the larger part of the meeting was held in English, but there were times where you would hear both Mandarin and Catalan being spoken by the various camps and the people who were there. But it was a great experience to be in Barcelona for those 3 weeks. And over one of the weekends, the Chinese colleagues and myself visited Camp Nou, which is the stadium that you see me standing next to, and you see the kind of a panoramic view during a game of a photo that I stole. So that was there to say we could, for example, go to football stadiums. But to tell you the truth, I enjoy the environment, the ambiance or whatever of a ballpark much more than a football stadium. And so I'm not sure that we will do football stadiums. And I'm also not sure that we will go for any of the newer baseball parks. This is one goal that we've achieved. Maybe we'll move on to something else. And what could that something else be? Well, there are a lot of national parks out there. And during our final visit in April of 2024, I turned 70. And so we achieved our goal of visiting all 30 ballparks right around the time I turned 70. And for my birthday, I was asked what would I like for presents. And I advised that I would enjoy things to commemorate the trip. And so we got this very nice ballpark inventory over in the left center and top portion of the slide, which is now hanging in our office. And on the far right, we got a leather-bound book of all the different major league parks, which was very, very nice. Okay, I'm going to comment on just a few of the pictures that I think I missed. You see Carol there. She's smiling and she's eating ice cream out of yet another one of those plastic ball caps. That's something we did at each of these parks, and quite enjoyably. I had to put a few of the books that I thought might relate, and I really enjoy Joe Posnanski as an author. He has some very humorous, enlightening stories about baseball, both in the Baseball 100 and Why We Love Baseball. And as I told you about the Mets' first two seasons, I thought it would be appropriate, where the Mets had their most significant struggles, to have the book So Many Ways to Lose, which tells the story of my Mets. Okay, here we go. Next to last slide. So just a few things here. One of the things that I thought might be interesting in the histogram with the various columns that you see is we visited 41 different games, or 82 teams. And so what I have compiled here is a histogram of how many times we saw each of the different teams in Major League Baseball. I wouldn't have guessed that we would have only seen the Yankees once. Maybe the Tampa Bay Rays, just owing to their distance, whatever. But I really wasn't thinking about the frequency of our visits to try and line up with teams. It was surprising to me when the Mets came out on top. Some of that was because we visited Shea early on, but still, we visited the Mets 7 times. Then look at the teams that we visited 5 times. The Twins, the Indians or the Guardians, the Cubs, and there you go. And then drops off to 4 with the Phillies, the Giants, the Braves, and the California Angels. Interesting. So we have the collection of our plastic caps also in the office. You can see that in the lower portion of the screen here. And on the upper left, some good friends from church, the Kratzers, hosted a Halloween party in 1986, and Carol and I went as baseball players. Not surprisingly, I went as a Mets fan, and Carol went as a Red Sox fan, so that's the Boston cap that you can see on her head as well. And there was a caricaturist there who did, I thought, an interesting shot or image, created an image of Carol and myself, which I share with you here. After we visited Globe Life in Texas in April of 2024, right around the time of the eclipse, I put out a Facebook posting that got a little bit of traffic that just summarized the fact that we had now visited all 30 major league parks. Okay, final slide. This last slide indicates in the top left, and this is the stat as before we did this episode, 37 episodes in the books, as my Mets announcer likes to say, with 1 to go. And that 1 to go is this one. And what this just shows is each of the already completed, because the 38th isn't completed quite yet, and it will be in the lower right portion of this slide when I complete the updates. But it shows you in one slide the length of time each of these episodes took. So folks, I really want to thank you if you've watched multiple of these for your interest. And as I said earlier, your comments. And I know that Carol and myself will treasure our baseball journey as we go forward. Thanks once again for your attention. And that's it.